When we think about GIS, we often think of it just as a mapping tool. But in fact, when we actually combine CAD and GIS, we get an awful lot more information out of it. In this webinar, we're going to look at how we can use it for mapping, and there we'll look at combining public sources of information from different places with our drawings. Then we'll look at how we can create our own private sources of information and combine those two and add our own geometry to those databases. We'll look at some coordinate reference systems and combining information from different sources that have been created in different reference systems and how Caddie handles that for us. We'll also look at some querying of some information, some analysis and some reporting. We're going to look at it from the perspective of architecture and design, some surveying such as tree surveying. Then we'll look at how it can be useful for people involved with security estates, shopping malls, and we'll look at some real-time data and monitoring. But as a starting point, let's just explain what we're looking at on screen here, and we'll get going with this. This is our main Caddie screen, but I'm in the GIS application, and I've started by bringing in a Bing satellite image of part of Pretoria in South Africa. So on the right hand side I can see my data sources that I've got set up, and you can see the top one has got a little yellow light on it. It shows that we're looking at that particular layer. I can have various layers superimposed on top of each other, or I can turn off layers and just look at different layers individually. So for instance, if I turn off my Bing satellite layer, I'm going to get to a blank screen. I can turn on my Google Roads layer, and that will show me the Google roads of the same sort of area. Similarly, I can turn on my hybrid layer. There are various other things as well that we can do. For instance, these are all raster images without an awful lot that we can query on them. But if we go to our OpenStreetMap vector layer, if we turn that one on, we'll get drawn objects. These are vector objects. All of these are pulled in from public data sources, as I mentioned. And here is a good example where we might want to combine the sort of the prettiness of the pictures with the intelligence of the vector. And the sort of intelligence I'm talking about is if I go to my info button over here, I can click one of the objects here and it will go and query. And in fact you'll see a pane has appeared down here and it says we're in Pretoria, it says it's a fast food. It's actually a steers shop and it's a burger bar. So the sort of things that we can do if we query in something else. Let's query one of the roads and see what this is. So it's going to run a query against that. Well, it's Park Street and it's asphalt with a maximum speed of 50 kilometers an hour on it. So as we bring in different data sources, depending on what they are, we can analyze them and get information that might be particularly useful to us. So let's turn off the OpenStreetMap vector, and we may be trying to work out if this is a sensible place to build something like a hospital. So if we go to the local data source switch here, if I just pause over it, it says it's ArcGIS and it says educational. So we can then take a look and see where all the educational establishments in the area. Okay, so well, it's showing a little bit bold, this one, so let's just dull it down a bit. We'll give it a bit of transparency and we'll change its color. And so now we can still see through these. But again, what is the information that we're seeing here? So let's go and say query and query that one. Well, in fact, there's not an awful lot of information showing to us about these ones. Just a object ID, so not particularly useful, but at least it shows us in this particular example where the educational establishments are within this vicinity. We may want to look at some boundary information, so let's say we want townships. So we look at the townships layer, and if we query one of those, oh, here we go, this is Sunnyside, and it's got a general plan number, it's registered when the information was captured, 2016. And then we can just click around to different ones. This is Arcadia, and this is Pretoria Central. So various bits of information that are available, and we can query any layers that we want. Depending on what we're trying to construct, it may be useful to see the sewer lines, so I'll put those on, and the stormwater. So just turn off the satellite information and you just get those specific information on your screen without it being too cluttered. So you get the general idea. We can find data sources from multiple places. Let's just put some contour lines on as well. So we put those on, and so there we go. We get contour lines plus the sewer lines plus the stormwater lines. So this is just basic general information about an area that we can use when we're working out the schemes we might want to use. One final thing, we also can look at live information. So this particular one at the bottom, fires, that is a data source. Again, it says it's an ArcGIS data source, and that one happens to be thermal imagery from satellite that is updated every half an hour. So if I turn that one on, it'll put any spots on the map where there's been any hotspots detected by satellite information. And in fact, there is one here. So let's just go and query that one. So on the 23rd of the 11th at 08:39, there was a bright hotspot detected in this particular location. So most likely it was some sort of fire or sort of thing. There are huge amounts of information that are available to us, and this will just enable us to analyze that information. So that's the very basic of using public sources. Having seen what information we can actually look at within a GIS environment, the next thing we want to have a look at here is how we can combine our own data with GIS information. If I flick to a different drawing here, we're going to have a drawing of a simple site plan that might have been generated by any designer. It's not geolocated in the world, it's just drawn near the origin of my sheet, and if I go and measure on it, you'll see that it's drawn in millimeters, and at the bottom here it says it's 16,000 millimeters, that dimension. Most coordinate reference systems or GIS information is going to want this in meters, but we also need to locate it at the right latitude and longitude in the world. So in order to do that, Caddie's got some pretty smart tools, and if I go to my GIS, I can go to, say, set a coordinate reference system. It already understands that it's in millimeters, so it says, would you like to rescale the existing drawing to meters? And I'm going to say yes. And then it allows us to go and set the coordinate reference system that we want for this particular scheme. So depending on where you are in the world, because the world is not on a flat plane, and we're using different projections to see mapping and effectively look at almost spherical world on a flat plane, we need to set a relevant coordinate reference system. We're not going to go into too much detail about that, but since I'm in Pretoria, one that allows us to take a drawing that is drawn in meters or millimeters and accurately project it and convert it to lat and longitude would be this one here, so the EPSG 2053. Depending on where you are in the world, you can just do a search and it'll show you all the relevant ones for that particular area. So I'm going to go and set that coordinate reference system, and now we need to actually go and move this to the right place. So what we're going to do is, if we go to our applications, GIS up here, it says move objects to a particular location. So it says pick the entities to move, and I'm just worried about my site plan, also my building outline here, and it says indicate the reference point. Now where in the world should that be? Well, I happen to know because I've been standing out on site and had my phone in my pocket, got it out, and it says the particular corner of that building should be at 25.75542 south, and the longitude 28.19837. It'll assume east, so we don't need to do that. So we're just going to say OK. And now if we can go and check that, so we can just say query points. And what's the top corner? We'll go into this auto snap mode, sit there, and 25.77542, 28, that's correct. At this point now, this is a completely accurate lat and longitude, so it'll tell you the lat and long of any points on the building. So that's got this building georeferenced in a sensible coordinate reference system. So now we need somewhere to put it. So we are going to just go and create ourselves our own GIS database. Now you can create GIS databases locally on your own PC, or you can create them on global servers such as Amazon Web Services, something like that. I'm going to do one locally here. So I'm just going to say add a data source, and it's going to be a MySQL. So various databases allow you to do spatial data sources. So I'm just going to call this one demo, and where are we going to put it? We're going to put it in a particular schema, and we're going to call it, well, just create a new one. So we need a couple of minimum fields if we're going to store information. You do this once for your own business, or it's the sort of thing that if you partner with us that we can do for you. So we're going to create a table called Black Friday webinar, and the table is going to hold geometry information. We're not going to add extra fields at this point, but if we're looking at things like tree surveys and things like that, we may want to have all sorts of other information fields when we create this, but we can always go and add those later on. So let's create the table, and we're going to go and save that one. And we should see now in our list, we've got another line in our table here, which is the demo one. So at this point, if I go into demo, I can then go and say, add geometry to the demo table. So it says to me, indicate the polyline or point that I want to add, and I'm going to say this one here. And it's automatically added it to the table. Anything that's already in any of our GIS tables is accessible to any drawing. So just to finish off on this one, just let's go back to our Tishwani, which we had earlier on in the first example, and let's go and add the information from the demo table into this drawing. And look, as if by magic, there it is. And that has automatically been superimposed on our drawing, which has got different data from different sources. So if I turn off all the other layers and just leave our building, you'll see that's the only thing from that particular data source, but I can superimpose it on which other levels and layers that we want to see it on. So we've seen how we can create a new table or a new data source that we can use in any future projects. What I'm actually going to look at here is how we can take that a stage further. We didn't add much information about our building because all we wanted to do was be able to superimpose that in a real-life position. But here we're going to take a look at what happens if we want a bit more information, such as we're responsible for some tree surveys and things like that. So if I zoom into this part of the drawing here, we'll see that we've created a few symbols that superimpose over some of the trees on the Google Maps or the Bing satellite image. And I've also, just to save a little bit of time, created a tree survey data source. So I'm going to look at how we can add these into the data source and add our own information to them. So first of all, I'm going to go to add geometry to tree survey. And it'll ask us to indicate the objects or M for multiple. So I'm going to say M for multiple, and I'm just going to draw a box around them, and there they are. They've all turned red, which shows us that these have been now added to the GIS data source. So what do we know about them? Well, like any other data source, we can go to the GIS tools and we can go to info. Let's take the one up here, and it says the property is, well, there's no information put in it yet, so let's go and add some. What was the date it was planted? Well, I don't actually know that. When was it surveyed? Well, it was surveyed yesterday, so 2021, 11/24. Next survey, well, next survey I want to do this in a year's time, 2022, 11/24. The spread of that tree was 12.7 meters. The girth of that tree was 0.85 meters. Was it diseased? Yes or no? No. And notes, condition excellent. And we can save that information. So if we go and query another one, just we could repeat ourselves down here, or when we go back to the one that we've already done, that information is already logged now in our database. So that is the very basics of adding information into the tables, which relate to survey information that you might have gleaned and need to store and need to access in the future. Since GIS information is database based, it's very easy to query and filter by whatever fields there are in the database. So if we take our tree survey, we can go to Query Properties, and I can say, show me all trees where the next survey is before 2022, 20th of April next year. And you'll see 2 trees are highlighted. Similarly, I could do the same sort of query again and say, show me all trees where the spread is greater than 12 meters. And that will select the trees with spread greater than 12 meters. So querying on any fields that you've managed to add information to in your database is quick, easy, and very effective. Let's now take a look at another aspect of GIS. Since a GIS table is actually a database, and we can store lots of different things in databases and we can link them together, we can then do some analysis on some data. So I'm going to swap to a different drawing here. And in this drawing, I am going to load the GIS information for one of my malls. So we have a mall called Twin Palms Mall, and I'm just going to load all the shops in that mall. So each of these rectangles represents a different shop in the mall, and I can go to info and I can click on one and it says this one is currently empty. What the area is, what the unit number is. So I click on that one, the tenant is Ultimate Fodder, the area of 2908, the lease ends on the 25th of the 7th, 2022. And we can click around cute and naughty, furniture extravaganza, world art, all-weather clothing, all the different information, and of course we can put as much information in there as we like. But there are a number of things that if we're managing malls or sets of buildings like this that might be very useful to be able to see. We can all look through spreadsheets, we can all trawl databases, but seeing some stuff graphically is often much easier to explain, certainly if you're going to presentations and trying to explain the principles to your peers. So a couple of things that just as examples, we have quite a lot we can report on, and in fact we have a custom reporting module where if you can do any queries you like, you can just dump it in there. But let's for a start take a look at something simple. You saw one of those fields is when the lease ends. One of the things when you're managing malls is we don't tend to want a lot of leases expiring in the same heart of the mall at the same time, because we can get dead spots and that'll reduce footfall and the units around the empty ones are going to suffer. So from time to time it might be useful to us to be able to have a look and see when those leases are expiring. So if I go to my apps and my GIS analysis and reporting, so I'm just going to go to a source table heat map here. And the one that I've got is the Twin Palms Mall lease expiry. So I've got a title here which is expiry by quarter, and here we can see that we've got a heat map colours which say if it expires between certain dates, colour it in different colours. So we can choose which layer we put it on, we can check the data, and we can do all the other stuff, but we're short of time here, so let's just click on OK. It's going to give us a copy of the mill drawing. We're going to put it down somewhere, and there we go. So what that's given us is a key on the top right there, and we can clearly see that there's probably not an ideal scenario coming up in this area here, because we got 3-4 shops at this point that are all going to expire at the same time. So we know that we've potentially got a forthcoming headache. So if we're renewing a lease on a property in one of the adjoining units, we probably want to make sure that they don't expire at the same sort of time as these. So that's sort of one report just based on data in the original table, pretty easy one. One of the other things that we may need if we're managing this sort of property is monthly reporting. How profitable are our shops, and are the rents sensible, and are there better places in the mall than others for positioning of shops? So if we want to do that sort of report, we can again go to our GIS analysis and reporting, and let's go for a custom map here. Again, what we've actually got here is we're going to report on the revenues between a certain period of time, and then effectively divide that by the area of the shop, which gives us a revenue per square meter, and see how our different units are doing. So if we again click on that, so we can position it, and we get a very interesting map. From here what we can see is this region down here is clearly the hotspot. So this is a more profitable region based on that particular month. To get some sensible results out of this, we probably need to run this for different months, which we could obviously easily do, and then we can do averages over months and that sort of thing. But whatever your reporting that you want to be able to do, one of CAD systems' specialities is changing colours and duplicating things. It's very, very easy to create this sort of map using Caddie. Another big growth market for GIS is where we're managing sets of properties such as security estates or student accommodation. So let's swap to a slightly different scheme. Here we've got a security estate that we can see there. So if I can bring in the data relating to it, and these are all the stands that are just highlighted. I'm going to turn off the satellite image because what we're interested in is the particular stands themselves. So if I go and click on one of the stands, it'll tell me who the owner is, what the stand area is, what the stand number is, whether it's got a pool, and any other information that we care to store about it. What gets interesting though is when we start to analyze the data related to it, because estates such as these, or as I say, student accommodation, there's a lot of information that can be stored against it. For instance, access of contractors or visitors. So if we go to our applications and we go to our GIS analysis and reporting, we may want to just look at some of this information. So here we go, we can have a look at the visitors on the particular stands. So if we come and have a look at this one, that'll tell us nicely color-coded which visitors within a period. I've done a very short period here. My data only is very new estate, so the data only started recently, but it'll tell us which stands have had the most visitors. Similarly, we can look at any incidents on the estate. So if we look at the incidents during November and put that one down there, so these are the stands that have reported incidents during whatever period of time, and then we can drill down into them to find out more about them. Especially it'd be useful to know whether those incidents have been resolved or not. If we're trying to analyse what's actually going on and what's causing problems, we can also look at specific information about the stands as a heat map as well. So for instance, we might well go to the analysis and reporting and look at stand sizes, for instance. So just give us a little picture of the stand sizes by colour. Or similarly, we may want to look at which stands have pools if we've got a water problem, and maybe sensible to know very quickly which stands have got pools on them or which stands have got pets because there's a pet running around. Other useful reports might be which stands have got people on site. So for instance, contractors are meant to leave maybe at 6 p.m. So at 6 p.m. we can call a very quick report, and which will be under the custom. And one of the reports here is which has contractors on site now. So if we just go and push this one down here, well then we know that the ones that are marked in red have got constructors on site at the moment. Similarly, who had visitors on site during a certain period of time. If we look at this one here, these are the stands with visitors on site at a certain date. So whatever information you want to pull relating to your schemes, Caddie makes it easy to do so. The final area I want to look at today is how we can access live and stored information about assets that we may have in our GIS system. So I'm going to switch to the UK portfolio here. Now these purple dots represent properties that we may have in our portfolio, and I'm just going to zoom into the one in Oxford here. And if we go in enough, we can see a depiction of the different rooms in our property that we own here. I'm going to turn off the map because we don't need that anymore, so we just leave ourselves with the property. And like before, we can click on various rooms. So we can click on this room here and it tells us it's the training room. But what you see here is we now have document URLs, picture URLs, feed and live data. So let's start with the pictures. So if we click on this field here, it'll take us to our browser where we can just access information that is stored about the training room in that building. Similarly, if we want to access documents, we can go to the document store, and these stores can be local or they can be online, wherever you like. It's just a URL. If we click on this little symbol here, this is the camera. And this, you'll see there are no documents, but what we do have here is a live feed. So if we click on the live feed, it'll take us to a browser where all I've got to do is stick in a password, log into the camera, and that will give us the live feed from that camera at any point in time. If I go back to my room, we'll see here that at the bottom we've got live data. We've got the temperature is currently 24.3, the internal door is open and the humidity is 65%. So at any point I can refresh that data and whatever sensors I've got connected up to that building can be accessed. What's more, we talked about heat maps a little while ago, so if I go back to my apps and my GIS and analysis and reporting, now I've got turned on create a live heat map. So for this particular building, which is my UK property details, let's just run a report on all rooms where the lights are on. So if I click on this one, it can take a little while, please wait, getting data, so it's analysing it, and we put it here. So it now says the light status today, 10:21, all the rooms in yellow currently have the lights turned on. So that pretty much wraps up what we're showing for today. I hope it's been useful.